Hi, welcome to this part of my guide and review featuring the FlexTale Solo Adventuring Toolkit. If you haven't seen the other parts of this guide and review series, please check out the playlist in the description below. This time we are going to talk about several things. First, I'm going to give you a brief summary of a few sections at the start at this particular segment of the book because I unknowingly gave you information about these different considerations in my most recent part. If you haven't seen that one, please check it out because I talk about party roles there, the three vitals, but I also talked about party composition and such, and many of those things are covered in these following sections. So in other words, you already know about my thoughts on that and some basic information as well. So I'm just going to be brief about this, but after that I am going to talk about the quest section of the book. And I think that's one of the most important or stronger points of the Solo Adventuring Toolkit. Well, let's get started. As always, sometimes I am going to be reading some of the paragraphs and I'm going to give you my opinion on those paragraphs. First, let's start with the summary. You have information on combat roles. That is, you have melee combat, ranged combat, healing, buffs and recovery, mobility and versatility, and this is pretty basic. I think this section is going to be very useful for those that have just started to play role-playing games, but for more experienced players, it's just a good section to come up with some combination of party roles. Maybe you want to play around with the concept of having more buffers and recovery-focused characters and some more mobility-focused roles within the party, and keeping melee combat to a minimum, perhaps just one player character specializing in melee combat. Then we have information on non-combat roles, that is, the different skills and specializations within the party that can be used in more socially inclined situations or any sort of encounter that is not resolved through the application of lethal force. So you have information on the character classes that are good for social encounters, Bard, the rogue, potentially sorcerer. What characters are good when it comes to infiltration and avoidance, like the monk, the rogue. Anything related to orientation and navigation, like the ranger, the druid. So it's just there as basic information for you to come up with your own party configurations. Then we have information on, for example, downtime. Between adventures, the campaign downtime roles. Some character classes could be handling businesses or interaction with non-player characters depending on their backgrounds, their skills, their plot roles. Then we have a section talking about party size and composition, how a smaller party is easier to handle as a solo player, but it is more difficult or less flexible compared to larger parties because, for example, if you have a party of, let's say, 5 or 6 player characters, then you are going to be enjoying many skills and powers and abilities contained within the packages of those character classes. But at the same time, if you are taking on adventures, missions and such, where subtlety, infiltration, and not standing out too much is important for the mission, for the quest at hand, then a large party could be a bit more cumbersome, more difficult as you try to maneuver all of those people without becoming too suspicious or standing out too much. But a smaller party of, let's say, 1 to 3 player characters, it's less powerful in terms of the resources, on the things that you can do, and in sheer numbers, taking into account that combat benefits from greater numbers. There is that difficulty, but on the other hand, in those missions that require subtlety, like I said, a more stealthy approach, blending in with the crowd, then a smaller party of 1 to 3 could be a bit more handy, but it all depends on the situation, on the spells, how you are handling your magical items, or in a science fiction setting, your devices, your gizmos, cloaking devices, etc. So it's just there for you to think about if you want to play a solo experience with a larger party or a smaller party. Then you have information on majors and minors concerning combat roles, the harmony and synergy. I think this is a great section because this is related to multi-classing. So for example, in many role-playing games, you can come up with your own original, let's say, combinations by multi-classing or dual classing. You have a very handy table telling you which classes are effective when used together. Because, for example, if you create a druid cleric, it could work because you would have access to healing spells, but also summoning spells, protection spells, perhaps things related to changing shape. So in a certain way, it could work since you're standing at the back of the party, of the group, while healing and buffing and every now and then stepping to the front to defend someone, support the melee role. But there are classes that are not very harmonious. So for example, maybe you want to create a monk bard. That's somewhat difficult because, well, you need to fight like a monk and jump and climb and use your key abilities, but that keeps you in the middle of combat usually, or at least mobile all the time, away from the other members of the party potentially, so they won't benefit from your songs or your buffing effects as a bard. It depends on the system, but some general guidelines apply to different role-playing games. You also have some usually impossible or difficult combinations. For example, maybe you want to create a barbarian monk. And one of the cool things is that they get these little names if you want to come up with those crazy combinations. So for example, a barbarian monk could be a raging fist or maybe a divine rager. So in those role-playing games, probably some old school style role-playing games where they don't have strict guidelines when it comes to alignment and abilities, like for example maybe one of the many variations of Dungeon Crawl classics. Maybe you want to combine a monk with a barbarian or a paladin with a barbarian. In this case, they call it the Holy Rager. Or maybe you want to combine a paladin with a druid as a mystic knight. So you have those considerations here, just in case you want to engage into those crazy combinations. So they talk about which combinations, like I said, are harmonious and how to integrate those combinations into the party of adventurers. Then we have a section that I also feel is quite basic, which is solo encounters. They just give you an overview on how you can handle different combat mechanics, the scaling of encounters, using the systems in this Solo Adventuring Toolkit, or your own systems depending on the role-playing game that you are using, how to integrate the Flex AI guidebook into combat encounters, one of the best AI systems that you can use to decide the actions of different non-player characters and enemies. They also talk about the Aquilae Bestiary of the Realm. That's a huge bestiary. It contains more than 1,660 monsters. I already have the Aquilae Bestiary of the Realm, but it's so huge. It contains information for almost, well, the most popular D20 based systems, that is any old school Renaissance system, Dungeon Crawl Classics, Pathfinder 1, Pathfinder 2, Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. I think it's very much worth it to get Aquilae Bestiary of the Realm if you like variations of the different monsters. That is, maybe you have the stats for an ogre, you have that same ogre at different levels of power, so that you can use that ogre in any adventure despite the level of the party of adventurers. It's a very worthwhile purchase in my opinion. You can purchase just the section, the monsters for a particular system, or you can purchase the entire encyclopedia, which is huge, tremendous. I highly recommend it. Maybe one of these days I'll get the chance, the time to give you my complete analysis on, I don't know if in the entire thing, because like I said, it's huge, but maybe on the majority of what I have managed to observe or go through. Then we have the section featuring solo quests. Let's start reading a bit about this. Specific encounters are one thing, but how best to string them together alongside exploration and discovery to form a story? It's possible to simply roll up a bunch of random encounters and play them through, but without an overarching structure to hang them off, it will feel a bit like an assembly line video game. For most people, combat without a story becomes tedious very quickly. The challenge specific to solo storytelling, of course, is that the same person who is defining that story is also playing it through. This section provides some thoughts and tools around addressing that challenge and to generate solo quests that remain satisfying in a manner similar to their traditional gaming table counterparts. When solo tools and emulators first came out, a lot of people had difficulty using them because they started the story, the adventure, they had these different plots, but they weren't so sure on how to end or lead those plots to a conclusion or finish the entire story. So with the use of these tables, the tools in the Solo Adventuring Toolkit to generate quests and side quests, this is a perfect way to define different segments of a single adventure or an entire campaign. Next, we have information on what is a quest. Quest is an intentionally vague word. It can be small or big. It could be a small task or a journey. It can last a few minutes or be the definition of the structure of an entire multi-year adventuring campaign. Generally speaking, most people think of a quest as a goal, an objective, an aim. Rescue the prisoners, steal the artifact, defeat the dragon, those sorts of things. So, in this Solo Adventuring Toolkit, a quest is being handled as any set of goals that an adventuring party can pursue, and the activities required or enacted towards those goals, which is really just a very overblown and self-important way of saying do stuff. So yes, that's a perfect description of what this section is going to take on. The value of a quest. Quests are valuable gameplay elements. They help drive action, they provide tangible motivation, and they can reveal and keep stories moving along. And this is true. In real life, almost everything that you are doing, at least more of the important things in life, are related to a personal quest, or in some cases even a sort of universal quest. So quests are very important to give some sort of purpose to your adventure. There is some loose way of handling this, of course. You don't need to define everything, but we will talk about that in a few moments. So quests add value to the game by providing some framework from which you can hang all of the pieces of the game that you usually consider to be the hour-to-hour bread and butter of gameplay. Quests make the game fun, and they are differently handled when it comes to solo gaming. When you're playing with your group, all of you are participating to handle a quest differently. As the game master provides the challenges, the quests, the party of adventurers, the other players, are going to be thinking on how to take on that quest. They are going to be acting, they are going to be fighting, they are going to be talking, depending on the configuration of the party. But when it comes to solo gameplay, because you're just one person, you're going to be approaching the quest from a somewhat, I wouldn't say narrow approach, but a more specialized approach based on your likes and dislikes, on your style of gaming. So that's important to consider as you are handling quests in a solo session. They also mention something here that I think is crucial when it comes to understanding one of the many benefits of solo gaming. When you are playing with your group, you all need to handle your schedules to take on different quests. You need to think on the long term of the campaign. If people are going to be available to play those quests or that overarching quest line as the campaign advances or moves forward, sometimes people will have to drop, or sometimes you won't be able to play your weekly game session or bi-weekly game session, however you want to handle it. And when it comes to quests, there could be members of the group that do not enjoy short quests, and there could be players who do not like long quests. So because you are playing by yourself, you're going to be taking on the quests that you like, that you want, whenever you like. So you have two types of session to handle these quest lines. You have the story session approach and the exploration crawl approach. Story session is focused completely on the story. This is pretty obvious. That is, the entire quest is going to guide the party of adventurers through different encounters and situations. You take on a quest and everything from point A to point B within that quest is going to lead to different situations, encounters, and even sub-quests. But then we have the exploration crawl session. This is also really fun. Sometimes you do not need to start with a quest. Like I said in one of the early videos of this review and guide series, you could use the dungeon crawl sort of generator at the start. You could use it to build a forest, a mountain, a swamp, a desert as you are moving through the adventure. And depending on your interaction with the non-player characters, with the environment, with some clues that you encounter, then some quests could pop along or be produced out of those encounters and of you finding certain items or artifacts or clues. So it's all about how you want to handle things. If you want a more story-driven, perhaps event-based approach, then consider the story session style. But if you just want to roam around, see what you encounter in anything generated by using the tables of the Solo Adventuring Toolkit in the style of Sword and Sorcery, then take the exploration or crawl session style to your game. That way you will go into those dangerous sites and suddenly, oh, you encounter this crown and it turns out that this group of non-player characters are after that crown and maybe you want to sell it or you want to take that crown to the legitimate owner. So then a quest begins. Or maybe you are moving around this other place and you encounter this trapped princess or this wealthy merchant, and now you free that princess or the merchant, and now you are hired to escort them back to their home or to some other place, and then another quest begins. And remember, the Solo Adventuring Toolkit contains the tables to generate those quests, the ways to handle clues and such, and we are going to talk about that in the next part of this review. Yes, I think we are going to start talking about clues in the next part, if I'm not mistaken. So yes, this concludes this part of the guide and review. As you can see, it's very exciting. A lot of players have been looking for this quest-driven approach. And like I said, if you want to handle a sandbox sort of adventure or campaign, then take the exploration crawl session approach and see what quests come out of your interactions with each different hex or section within the map. Thank you for watching this guide and review. If you have any comments or questions, please let me know. And thank you so much to those of you that have been supporting the channel by sending drive-thru RPG gift certificates. If anyone else wants to further support the channel, the information on how to do that will be in the description below. Once again, thank you and see you later.